Listen, I want to show you this really quick before I let you go. So this is from the Post. It says Joe Biden's transition official wrote an op-ed advocating free speech restrictions. This is from November 13th. So Joe Biden's transition official wrote an op-ed advocating free speech restrictions. Richard Stengel is the Biden transition team lead for the U.S. Agency for Global Media, the U.S. government media empire that includes Voice of America, the Middle East Broadcasting Networks, and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Stengel, an Obama administration alumnus, wrote last year that U.S. freedom of speech was too unfettered and that changes must be considered. He wrote, all speech is not equal, and where truth cannot drive out lies, we must add new guardrails. I'm all for protecting thought we hate, but not speech that incites hate. Stengel offered two examples of speech that he has issues with: the Quran burning and the circulation of false narratives by Russia during the 2016 election. And here's Barack Obama. He's going along with the same narrative. He says the internet is the single biggest threat to our democracy. Obama said the First Amendment doesn't require private companies to provide a platform for any view that is out there. At the end of the day, we're going to have to find a combination of government regulations and corporate practices that address this, because it's going to get worse. If you can perpetrate crazy lies and conspiracy theories just with text, imagine what you can do when you can make it look like you or me are saying anything on the video. We're pretty close to that now. So Barack Obama would ban War of the Worlds, but I wonder if he would ban lies like this.
Can I get some water?
Before a crowd of 1,000.
I really did need a glass of water. This is not a stunt.
So is that considered a deep fake? Is that considered garbage? Is that considered a false narrative? By the way, here he is doing it again.
There you go. Generally I have not been doing stunts here, but
But here's a stunt. This is obvious bullshit. And I'm pretending the water's fine in Flint, Michigan. So that's misinformation, but that's okay. So the biggest purveyors of misinformation, here's one more. And just remember, Citigroup chose Obama's cabinet, and WikiLeaks revealed that. So they would have that stifled. Obama wants to stifle that, but he doesn't want to stifle his bullshit water drinking. Can you want to go ahead and speak to what's happening right now?
Yeah, well, interestingly, just to add a quick fact to that article that you discussed at the beginning, that Rich Stengel used to be the editor-in-chief of Time magazine. So in addition to being an ex-Obama official and a future Biden official, he used to be a very influential journalist as well, that person who's calling for hate speech restrictions. Let me tell you a couple of things. When I first started writing about politics, as I said, one of the reasons that I started writing was because of the civil liberties assaults being perpetrated in the name of the war on terror. And the argument was terrorism, Islamic extremism is such a grave threat that we have to limit all these previous civic rights that we once enjoyed. And there's an article from 2006, you could Google this, and you should, because it's a sign of what's coming, where Newt Gingrich gave a speech and he said, I think we need to amend the First Amendment so that we reduce the amount of the range of free speech that is protected in the name of terrorism, because Islamic extremism is so dangerous. It's not just an idea, it incites hatred, using exactly that same formulation, that we need to get around the Supreme Court cases that say we can't ban it by amending the Constitution to ban it if we want to win the war on terror. Another tactic that they used to use is the FBI would go searching for Muslim terror plots that didn't really exist. They would manufacture them because they wanted to keep fear levels high and convince people that the threat was much greater than it was. So they would get an informant, some guy who they caught on credit card fraud charges or whatever, who was Muslim. And they would say, hey, if you want to stay out of prison, you need to go work for us as an informant. And they would send them into mosques or to college campuses. And they would target not very smart, emotionally disabled 21-year-old Muslim kids, and they would deceive them and manipulate them into saying okay, yeah, I'll join your plot to go blow this thing up. They would offer poor Muslim kids money. Hey, if you join the plot, I can get you $10,000. oh yeah, my mother needs that, I'll join the plot. And then the FBI would come in at the last second and say, we just arrested this ring of Muslims who were plotting to blow up this bridge in Buffalo, when in reality it was the FBI's fucking plot.
Yes.
They were manufacturing those things. This is what they're going to do, Jimmy. It's exactly that. They're going to say the adversaries of the Democratic Party are not just Republicans or conservatives. These are fascists. They're domestic terrorists. And they're going to go find some like group of 21-year-old meth heads in like Montana. And the FBI is going to send in an informant, like some white kid. And they're going to be like, hey, why don't we go murder Gretchen Whitman or Rahm Emanuel or whoever the fuck? And then they're going to be like, look, we just disrupted this plot. And then MSNBC is going to be like, breaking, CNN, breaking. This white terrorist ring here is plotting to do this violence, and they're going to drive up fear levels. So not only do you watch MSNBC and buy the New York Times, but also you then support the Biden administration when they say we need to censor this stuff on the internet because this is dangerous. This is terrorism, just like Newt Gingrich wanted to do in the war on terror. This is the stuff they're planning. This is going to be an extremely authoritarian administration. They have the FBI and the CIA and the NSA behind them who all supported them. All those fucking Bush Cheney goons and ghouls from, neocons to like the Dick Cheney, Karl Rove disciples are all on their side. They have Silicon Valley and Wall Street, and they are going to try and choke the legal processes of this country and free discourse over the internet in the name of scaring the shit out of people and then saying that it's necessary to stop the threat, just like Bill Clinton tried to do after Oklahoma City when he tried to get a backdoor to the internet to stop the white militias, just like Bush and Cheney did by scaring everybody about Muslims. This is what they're going to do, is they're going to say, this is the new threat we face and we need these powers to stop it.
Well, Glenn, but what's weird is that it's not just coming from government officials like Barack Obama and Joe Biden's administration. And I didn't realize that was that ex-Time magazine guy. I have a video clip of him saying propaganda is good and necessary. Anyway, I wish I'd have known that's who that was. Anyway, so what the weird thing is that it's coming from journalists, right? So here's a guy, Mehdi Hassan, and he had on another joker from Vox. Vox, by the way, they're owned by NBC. They're very pro censoring people like me and you. That's what Vox is in business for, to squelch their competition, which is people like me. And by squelching them, I mean by using the nefarious legal means to do so. Censorship, using censorship. That's what Vox is all about. That's what that Carlos Maza was about. And so watch this. This is kind of stunning. Let's watch them talk about how, now remember, they have to keep us from bad information. These people, they all know what, they can all tell what's bullshit, but they're there to make sure that we don't get suckered. And let's listen.
It's not just Fox News and OANN and Newsmax and all these right-wing outlets. It's also social media as a whole. It's not just cable news. It's social news, which is supposed to be liberal, Silicon Valley. And yet, for example, in the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, you have all these social media employees talking about these platforms are manipulating their audiences. And tech pioneer Jaron Lanier has this amazing warning at the end of the film. He says, if we go down the status quo for, let's say, another 20 years, we probably destroy our civilization through willful ignorance. And he's talking about the role of social media disinformation there. That's not just cable news. We're way past cable news.
So now, before we get to this joker, what they're doing there and what that movie did was it took the very real thing of social media apps being able to have all algorithms that tune into that tap into the part of your brain that causes addictions, right? So they know how to manipulate your brain to make you addicted to their app, right? Then that movie makes the leap of, also because of that, we need to suppress conspiracies and bad information because people are susceptible to it. Hey, I don't know if you know, but there's a thing called the Iraq War that happened in my lifetime. Complete bullshit printed in the New York Times and the Washington Post. Should we then deplatform the Washington Post and the New York Times because we went to a war over what they printed? So let's just listen to what they say, and then I'll have you comment on it, okay? Here we go.
Sure. And I think what we're trying on social media is, what if you spread information with no gatekeepers? And I think what you find out is, in an atmosphere with no gatekeepers at all, misinformation wins because it's more compelling, it's more fast, it appeals to your negative emotions. more, it's just more clickable. So if all you want, if your only algorithm is clicks and virality and that kind of thing, it's going to be misinformation that wins in that environment. What we're just finding out is you can't operate a coherent information ecosystem without some kind of trusted gatekeepers. There's just no way around it.
It's not just Fox.
And guess what? Guess who those guardrail gatekeepers are? This is the kind of stuff that those guardrail gatekeepers do. They push us into wars with fake evidence. That's what they do. Hey, lie by lie, a timeline of how we got into the Iraq War. 16 years later, how the press that sold the Iraq War got away with it. Hey, the number of documented civilian deaths in the Iraq War from 2003 to 2020, there you go. That's from misinformation in the goddamn New York Times and the Washington Post. And what I said, the corporate left pushes censorship under the guise of combating disinformation. Just like every dictator and totalitarian regime, they have to limit bad information from outside agitators, sowing discord for our own good. Corporate news is by far the biggest pushers of disinformation. So let me just throw it to you, Glenn. What do you have to say to this? These guys who are journalists calling for the other people to censor other journalists. Go ahead.
I mean, the smugness and just oozing arrogance of that clip makes me want to almost do violence, like physical violence, to that particular individual who said that we cannot possibly manage our discourse without them acting as our gatekeepers, as our overseers, determining what we can and can't hear. I mean, speaking of the Iraq War, that network that owns that platform that you just showed was one of the prime propagators of the lies of the Iraq War. Talk about disinformation. They needed fucking gatekeepers. It was Meet the Press that Tim Russert would have Dick Cheney on every other Sunday to talk about Saddam's nuclear program. And MSNBC actually did have one person on their network who was against the Iraq War. You know what his name was? Phil Donahue. And they fucking fired him for exactly that reason. So they're the ones, they're going to use that network to say, we can't allow people to conduct their own conversations without us acting as their gatekeepers, as their overlords, because otherwise on the very network that sold America, not just the Iraq War, they turned the people who did the 2008 financial crisis into heroes. Andrea Mitchell is on that network. She's married to fucking Alan Greenspan. And then what about the last 4 years? 2016 to 2020 of convincing Americans that we've been taken over by the fucking Kremlin, and that like putting Adam Schiff on every night saying he heard, like he's seen definitive proof of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, only for the Mueller investigation to close and not only say they couldn't find any evidence to establish that, but they did not arrest one person, not one American, for criminally conspiring with the Russians over the election. The whole point of the conspiracy theory in the first place. Those are our fucking gatekeepers, the people that we need to control our. We don't need any gatekeepers. That was the whole point of the internet to begin with. That was why it existed. That was the promise of it. It was supposed to be free. And Edward Snowden gave up his liberty in defense of that idea, right? Like using it as mass surveillance, monitoring us, is to degrade and convert the internet from this tool of liberation into one of coercion. Same thing if now we're going to have this little fucking worm, Dave Roberts or whatever at Vox, telling us that the only kind of information that can be disseminated is one that he as the gatekeeper approves of. All right, Jimmy, you're working me up too much. I got to go.
Glenn, but what do you say about that? I know you got to go, but since you made me wait, I'm going to make you wait. What do you say about the environment where these people come on, not even afraid a little bit to come out on television and advocate for fucking censorship so that other grown-ups don't get to see information? How does that happen where people who are journalists, that there's we're in an era where somehow this is okay. Like they're not even a little bit afraid of it.
I mean, this is the problem, that this is the core cultural transformation of journalism. Is journalists used to be the people who went to work at the like local newspaper and they got their fingers stained. It was like a working class job. They didn't go to Harvard or Yale. They like got out of high school and they worked as, interns in the newsroom, and they got like copy editing jobs, and they covered zoning boards. That was like that's why there were so many guilds, was because they were union people. They identified as working class. They hated the power structure. They hated the insiders. They loved to throw. That was the personality type that was attracted to journalism, were anti-authoritarians. And then when journalism started to corporatize and get owned by Comcast and NBC Universal and Disney, and I don't even know who owns fucking CNN anymore. I think it's AT&T. Who is it who thrives in corporations? In just any people like this, little authoritarian goons who believe that the masses need to be controlled by their superiors, by their betters. They all went to Ivy League schools. They all grew up in upper middle class homes. They all make a very good living. They all live in Brooklyn or Washington, D.C. or Northern Virginia or Bethesda, Maryland, or on the West Coast. And they look at the people in the middle of the country as primitive mongrels who can't conduct their own discourse without their control. And so the reason that they say it openly is because this is the environment in which they work. This is what they say. This is what they believe. And they don't realize how sickening it is when you hear it if you don't actually believe it, because everyone in their world just assumes it's true.
Well, I'll just say I've been blocked by Mehdi ever since I called his bullshit about Syria. So he was pushing lies about Syria, and I let him know that he was pushing lies, so he blocked me. And then when I tweeted out this guy being authoritarian, censoring, he blocked me too. So that's how much they're for free speech. So just so you know, if you correct them for being authoritarian. But Glenn, thank you so much for coming on. I could talk to you for all night long, but I know it's much later where you are. It's 11:30, right? So I appreciate you staying up with us, and thanks for coming on, and thanks for all the great work you're doing, and with the dogs and the homeless people. It's very meaningful to a lot of people. So thanks, and thanks for always standing up.
Thank you, Jimmy. Try not to wait like 2.5 years for the next invitation for me to come back on your show. I'm always happy to come back on. I know you've been deceiving your guests the whole time into pretending that you've been inviting me on, and I've been avoiding it when the reality, as we know, is much different. But my inbox is always open for you.
Okay. All right. Well.
All right, Jimmy.
We'll see you next time, Glenn. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Bye.
Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.